The great meeting hall of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. Hundreds of beings from across the galaxy sat in curved rows that rose like steps toward the ceiling, but none dared to speak. Their usual chatter and movement had been replaced by a heavy silence as they watched the hologram floating in the center of the room. Another solar system was dying. Council member James Smith, the only human in the room, leaned forward in his seat. His weathered face showed none of the fear that filled the alien faces around him. Instead, his eyes narrowed as he studied the crystal formation that was spreading through the hologram like ice across a pond. System T-749 has gone dark, announced first speaker White, his thin frame trembling despite his formal robes. His pale blue skin had turned almost white with stress. This marks the 47th system lost to the crystal entity in the past 3 months. Worried whispers filled the hall. Smith watched as various council members shifted in their seats, some pulling their wings closer to their bodies, others wrapping extra arms around themselves for comfort. He had spent 5 years learning to read alien body language, and right now, every species in the room was showing signs of deep fear. The combined fleet reports complete failure in their latest attempt to stop the entity. White continued, his voice growing shakier. Energy weapons are absorbed. Physical impacts cause no lasting damage. The entity simply repairs itself and continues its advance. The hologram shifted to show the fleet's latest battle. Smith watched as ships from 15 different species, some sleek and beautiful, others massive and powerful, fired everything they had at the approaching wall of crystals. Their weapons splashed harmlessly against its surface or were swallowed into its structure. "We have lost contact with Colony World B-271, a new voice announced. One of the insectoid members had risen from their seat, their antennae drooping in distress. The crystal growth has consumed their outer settlements. Evacuation ships are en route, but early projections suggest only 60% of the population will escape in time." Smith felt a familiar tightness in his chest. It was the same feeling he'd had years ago when fighting forest fires back on Earth, watching an unstoppable force consume everything in its path while people ran for their lives. But this was different. This was bigger. "The analysis division has completed their latest calculations," White said, pressing a button that changed the hologram. A complex web of numbers and predictions filled the air. At the current rate of expansion, total collapse of galactic civilization will occur within 1 standard year. The silence broke. Panic erupted in the chamber as council members began shouting, some calling for immediate evacuation of border worlds, others demanding more resources for the combined fleet. A few simply sat there, seemingly frozen in shock. Smith stood up slowly, his movement drawing attention from those nearest to him. Most species still found humans unsettling. Too many teeth, too much muscle mass, moving too quickly when they weren't paying attention. But right now, that unsettling presence worked in his favor. "First speaker," he called out, his voice cutting through the chaos. "I request permission to address the council." White gestured for him to continue, probably grateful for any interruption to the growing panic. "We've tried the most advanced weapons in the galaxy," Smith said, keeping his voice steady and clear. "We've used the best ships, the most sophisticated analysis tools, and the most brilliant tactical minds from 15 species. And we failed. But there's one thing we haven't tried yet." He paused, knowing what he was about to suggest would be controversial. Around him, the alien council members had gone quiet again, all eyes, stalks, and sensory organs fixed on the only human in the room. "We haven't tried letting humans handle this their way," Smith continued. "You call Earth a death world. You call us primitive and violent. But maybe that's exactly what we need right now. Maybe we need someone who evolved on a planet that tried to kill them every day. Someone who knows how to fight against impossible odds." The council chamber erupted into arguments once again, but Smith could see it in their faces. They were desperate enough to consider it. And sometimes, he knew, Desperation was exactly what you needed to try something new. The end was coming, and humanity might be the only species crazy enough to stop it. 3 days after Smith's suggestion, the council chamber looked very different. The curved rows were now filled with military advisors and scientists from across the galaxy. Holograms showed battle reports, evacuation updates, and the ever-growing crystal threat. But all eyes were focused on the large screen showing a transmission from Earth. General Marcus stood before them, his military uniform neat but simple compared to the elaborate outfits of the alien officials. He had gray hair, a strong build, and scars on his face that made several council members shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Let me be clear," Marcus said, pointing to the crystal formation images. "Your current approach is wrong. You're fighting this thing like it's an enemy army. It's not. It's a force of nature." First Speaker White's antenna twitched. "We don't understand. The entity is destroying whole systems. How is this not an attack?" Marcus smiled, showing those unsettling human teeth. "When a volcano erupts on Earth, it's not attacking us. When a hurricane strikes, it's not trying to kill us. They're just doing what comes naturally. This crystal thing, it's doing the same." The council members exchanged confused looks. One of the floating gas-based beings drifted forward. "But we have tried everything. Our weapons." "Your weapons are designed to fight other ships and armies," Marcus interrupted. "Tell me, when there's a forest fire on your worlds, do you shoot it with lasers?" Silence fell over the chamber. Many species came from worlds where such natural disasters simply didn't exist. On Earth, Marcus continued, "we face deadly threats from our planet every day. Earthquakes, tsunamis, tornadoes, volcanic eruptions, forces that can't be reasoned with or surrendered to. You don't defeat nature. You learn to work with it, redirect it, or get out of its way." He pressed a button, and new images appeared. They showed humans fighting forest fires, building flood barriers, and reinforcing buildings against earthquakes. "We've evolved on a world that constantly tries to kill us," Marcus explained. "That's why you call us Deathworlders. But it also means we understand something you don't. There's always a way to survive. You just have to stop thinking like a soldier and start thinking like someone who's lived their whole life dancing with death." First Speaker White leaned forward. "What exactly are you suggesting, General?" "I'm suggesting you let us handle this our way. No fancy energy weapons, no massive fleet battles. We need mining ships, construction equipment, and about 50 crazy humans who are used to working in deadly conditions." The council erupted into discussions. Smith watched as the aliens debated among themselves. He could see the doubt in their movements, the fear in their voices, but he could also see desperation. A small crystalline being, ironically similar to the threat they faced, raised their voice. "This is madness. These humans are suggesting we face this threat with construction equipment. They're primitives. They still use combustion engines on their home world." Marcus laughed, the sound making several council members jump. "Yes, we're primitives. We also survived an ice age with nothing but stone tools and animal furs. We crossed oceans in wooden boats. We climbed the highest mountains just because they were there. Being primitive doesn't make us weak. It makes us incredibly hard to kill." He pressed another button, and a new image appeared. A simple diagram that made several alien scientists gasp in recognition. "We've analyzed your data," Marcus said, "and we think we know what this crystal entity is doing. It's not attacking. It's growing. And if there's one thing humans understand, it's how to deal with unwanted growth." First Speaker White looked at the council members, then back at Marcus. "How quickly can you begin?" "We've already started loading the equipment. My team can be at the front lines in 3 days. Just remember, what you're about to see might look primitive, dangerous, and completely insane. But trust me, that's just how we do things on Earth." As the transmission ended, Smith couldn't help but smile. The aliens around him were still nervous, still doubtful, But for the first time since the crisis began, there was something new in the air. Hope. And if there was one thing humans were good at, it was turning hope into victory, no matter how impossible the odds seemed. The docking bay of the Council's main station was chaos. Aliens of all species rushed back and forth, trying to make sense of the strange equipment being unloaded from the human ships. Instead of the sleek weapon systems they were used to, they saw rugged mining lasers, industrial drills, and containers full of what looked like simple chemicals. In the middle of this chaos walked Captain Anna West, her heavy boots making loud clicks against the polished floor. She wore a basic pressure suit with worn patches and scuff marks, signs of real work that made the pristine alien uniforms around her seem almost artificial. She stopped at a viewing window, watching the crystal entity in the distance. Even from here, its massive form glittered like a deadly rainbow, spreading across space. Captain West, First Speaker White, hurried toward her, followed by a group of alien scientists. "We expected General Marcus. The General sends his regards," Anna said, not taking her eyes off the crystal. "But you don't need a military commander for this job. You need someone who understands how crystals grow." She turned to face them, her expression serious. "I spent 15 years mining crystals in the asteroid belt. This thing, it's just a bigger version of what I dealt with every day." One of the alien scientists, a tall being with multiple arms, stepped forward. "With respect, Captain, this entity has destroyed 49 systems. It's not some simple mineral deposit." Anna pulled out a small crystal from her pocket. "See this? It's a basic quartz crystal from Earth. Grows in a predictable pattern." She held it up to the window, comparing it to the massive formation in space. "And that big beauty out there is growing in exactly the same way, just a lot faster and a lot bigger." The aliens crowded around her, their various sensory organs focused on the small crystal. "Look at these angles," Anna continued, pointing at the crystal's edges. "Now look at the entity. Same pattern, same structure. We're not fighting a weapon or an alien invasion. We're dealing with a natural process that's gone out of control." First Speaker White's antenna drooped. "But how does this help us stop it?" Anna smiled. "On Earth, we learned to control crystal growth thousands of years ago. Any kid with a chemistry set can do it. You've been trying to destroy it. That's impossible. But changing how it grows, that we can do." She walked over to one of the containers her team had brought, opening it to reveal racks of simple-looking equipment. "These are modified versions of what we use to control crystal formation in space mining," she explained. "When crystals grow too fast, or in the wrong direction, we introduce impurities, change the temperature, alter the electromagnetic field. The crystal either changes direction or stops growing completely." The alien scientists began chattering excitedly among themselves, their earlier skepticism turning to interest. "Show us," one of them said. Anna set up a small demonstration right there in the docking bay. Using a heated container and some simple chemicals, she created a rapidly growing crystal structure. Then, with a few precise adjustments, she made it stop growing, change direction, and finally break apart completely. "Now imagine this on a massive scale," she said, gesturing to the equipment being unloaded. "We're going to seed space around the entity with specially designed impurities, create energy fields that will disrupt its growth pattern. Basically, we're going to give it really bad growing conditions." First Speaker White watched the demonstration crystal crumble. This could actually work." "Of course it will work," Anna said, packing up her demonstration. "You know why? Because humans don't just survive on our death world. We learned to control it. Every dangerous thing on Earth, we found a way to handle it. Sometimes you need big guns and armies, but sometimes you just need to understand how nature works and use it against itself." She turned to her team, who were already preparing the equipment. "We'll need 24 hours to modify the mining ships and prepare the seeding materials. After that," she looked back at the crystal entity, a determined glint in her eyes. "After that, We're going to show this thing that it picked the wrong galaxy to grow in. The aliens watched as the humans worked, their movements precise and purposeful. They didn't look like the advanced saviors the Council had hoped for. They looked like workers, miners, people used to getting their hands dirty. But maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what they needed to be. The Council's main laboratory had never seen anything like this before. Instead of the usual complex quantum computers and energy analyzers, Captain West had set up what looked like a simple school science experiment. A large table held containers of various solutions, heating elements, and basic crystal samples. The alien scientists crowded around, their curiosity overwhelming their usual distaste for primitive methods. Even First Speaker White had come to watch. "Pay attention," Anna said, holding up a clear container. "This is going to explain exactly what we're dealing with." She poured a hot solution into the container. "This is just sugar water, but it's going to teach us something important." One of the alien scientists, Professor Blue, waved his sensory tentacles in confusion. "You're using food to explain a system-destroying cosmic entity." "Exactly," Anna smiled, stirring the solution. "Watch this." She dipped a string into the container with a tiny crystal tied to its end. This is how crystals grow naturally. They need the right conditions and a seed point to start. The aliens leaned in closer as tiny crystals began forming along the string. "See how orderly it is?" Anna pointed to the growing crystals. "Now watch what happens when I do this." She sprinkled a small amount of powder into the solution. Immediately, the crystal formation became distorted and irregular. "By introducing the right kind of impurities," she explained, "we can control how and where crystals grow, or stop them from growing altogether." Professor Blue's color shifted to a deeper shade, a sign of deep thought among his species. "But the entity in space, it's massive, and it seems to adapt to everything we throw at it." Anna nodded. "That's because you've been trying to destroy it, but we're going to do something different." She pulled up a holographic display showing the entity's growth pattern over the last 3 months. "Look familiar?" She pointed to the pattern, then to her small crystal experiment. "It's the same basic process, just on a cosmic scale. The entity is using stellar material as its growth solution. Every star system it encounters becomes raw material for more crystal growth." First Speaker White moved closer to the display. "But how does this help us stop it?" Anna grinned. "We don't need to destroy it. We just need to make its growth environment hostile." She pressed a button, bringing up plans for the modified mining ships. These ships will carry specially designed particles. Think of them as cosmic impurities. We'll seed them in a specific pattern around the entity. She demonstrated by adding different substances to her crystal experiment. The growing crystals began to twist and break in predictable ways. "The first wave of ships will create an electromagnetic field to slow its growth," she explained. "The second wave will introduce our impurities, particles designed to disrupt its crystalline structure. The third wave will use focused energy beams to stress the weakened points." Professor Blue's tentacles waved excitedly, like introducing flaws into a gem. "Exactly." Anna beamed at him. "You're getting it. We're not trying to blow it up. We're going to make it impossible for it to maintain its structure, like building a house on shifting sand." She showed them more simulations, each one demonstrating how their plan would work. The aliens began to understand, their skepticism turning to cautious optimism. "But what if it adapts?" one of the younger scientists asked. "It's shown remarkable ability to repair itself." Anna walked over to another experiment she had set up. This one showed crystals growing in different environmental conditions. "That's why we're going to hit it with multiple types of disruption at once. Think about trying to write with someone shaking your arm, changing the gravity, and moving your paper all at the same time. Even if you can adapt to one problem, handling all of them at once becomes impossible." The aliens watched as she demonstrated, using different methods to disrupt crystal growth simultaneously. Each time, the crystals failed to form properly. First Speaker White's antenna twitched thoughtfully. "This is not what we expected when we asked for human help." "No," Anna agreed, looking at her simple experiments with pride. "You expected weapons and warriors. Instead, you got a bunch of miners and scientists who understand how nature works. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best ones." She turned to face the gathered aliens. "Tomorrow, we start modifying the ships. The day after, we begin seeding operations. And soon, very soon, we're going to show this crystal entity that sometimes the best way to stop a natural process is with another natural process." Professor Blue finished, his color now showing excitement. Anna smiled. The aliens were finally starting to think like Deathworlders. The massive hangar bay of the Council station looked like a construction site from Earth. 50 modified mining ships stood in rows, their usually sleek hulls now covered with additional equipment. Sparks flew as human workers made final adjustments, their movements quick and confident despite the alien environment. Captain Anna West walked between the ships, checking each modification herself. Behind her, Professor Blue floated along, his tentacles moving rapidly as he took notes. "Amazing," he said, watching a team install what looked like giant salt shakers on one ship's hull. "These are the particle dispensers." "Yep." Anna patted the nearest dispenser. "Each one holds enough material to contaminate a small star system. We've got 3 different types of particles, each designed to disrupt the crystal growth in a different way." A loud clang echoed through the hangar as a worker dropped a tool. Several alien observers jumped at the noise, but the humans barely noticed, continuing their work. "Time check," Anna shouted. 4 hours until launch window," came the reply from multiple voices. She nodded and turned to a large holographic display, showing the crystal entity's current position. It had already consumed another system while they prepared, its massive form growing larger by the hour. "Captain," a voice called from above. Tom, one of her best engineers, was hanging upside down from a ship's maintenance platform. "We've got the energy field generators installed on ships 1 through 20. Want to test them?" "Do it," Anna ordered. Tom pressed a button on his remote control. 20 ships hummed to life, creating a visible distortion in the air between them. The alien observers gasped as the energy field took shape. "That's just at 10% power," Anna explained to Professor Blue. "At full strength, it'll create an environment that makes crystal growth nearly impossible, like trying to freeze water in a hot oven." Professor Blue's color shifted to a deep purple of concern, but the entity has shown remarkable adaptation capabilities. "What if?" "That's why we're not just using one method," Anna interrupted, walking to another section of ships. These had strange-looking arrays mounted on their sides. "These ships will create focused vibration beams. Think of it like playing music so loud it shatters a wine glass. Between the particle contamination, energy fields, and vibration beams, the entity won't have time to adapt." She checked her tablet, reviewing the final preparations. Human workers moved with practiced efficiency, each knowing their role. What looked like chaos to the aliens was actually a well-orchestrated dance of preparation. "Listen up," Anna called out, her voice cutting through the noise. The workers stopped and gathered around. "Final checklist time. Team leaders, report. Particle dispensers, all loaded and tested. Energy field generators, synchronized and ready. Vibration arrays, calibrated and powered. Navigation systems, updated with final approach vectors." As each team reported in, First Speaker White entered the hangar. He looked around at the modified ships, his antenna twitching nervously. "Captain West," he said, approaching Anna, "the Council is concerned about the lack of weapons on these ships." Anna smiled. "With all due respect, Speaker, we've got something better than weapons. We've got science, experience, and 50 of the craziest miners and engineers humanity could find." She gestured to her crew. "These people have fought nature their whole lives. Earthquakes, volcanoes, crystal formations in space. and they're still here. The speaker looked at the humans, noting their worn work clothes, their scared hands, their confident movements, so different from the careful, precise aliens he was used to. The launch window opens in 3 hours, Anna continued. Every ship is ready. Every crew member knows their part. We're not going to fight this thing. We're going to change the rules of its game. She turned to address both her crew and the alien observers. This isn't about having the biggest guns or the most advanced technology. It's about understanding how nature works and using that knowledge. That's what we humans do best. The workers cheered, their voices echoing through the hangar. Even some of the aliens joined in, caught up in the humans' confidence. Professor Blue's color had shifted to a bright orange of excitement. You really think this will work? Anna looked at her crews, at the modified ships, at the determination on every human face. On Earth, we have a saying, nature always wins, but sometimes you can convince it to play a different game. The final hours of preparation began, each moment bringing them closer to their confrontation with the crystal entity. The fate of the galaxy would depend not on advanced alien technology, but on human ingenuity and their deep understanding of natural forces. The Deathworlders were ready to show the galaxy how Earth natives handled impossible problems. The fleet of modified mining ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of a dying solar system. Through their view screens, they could see the crystal entity's massive form, its surface glittering with deadly beauty as it consumed another planet. Captain Anna West stood on the command deck of the lead ship, her experienced eyes studying the enemy. Professor Blue floated beside her, his tentacles curled tight with tension. It's even bigger than the holograms showed, he whispered. Anna nodded. Size doesn't matter. Crystal growth follows the same rules whether it's in a test tube or space. She activated the fleet-wide communication system. All ships, sound off. Group 1, particle dispensers ready. Group 2, energy field generators at full power. Group 3, vibration arrays charged. Remember, Anna's voice was steady. This is just like disrupting crystal formation in the asteroid belts back home, just on a bigger scale. She took a deep breath. Begin Phase 1. The first 20 ships moved forward in perfect formation. Their modified hulls opened like flowers, revealing the giant particle dispensers. On Anna's command, they released clouds of specially designed particles into space. Particles deploying. Tom's voice came over the comm from one of the lead ships. Spread pattern matching simulation. The clouds expanded, creating a shimmering barrier between the fleet and the crystal entity. Through the command deck's windows, they could see the particles beginning to interact with the entity's outer layer. Phase 2, Anna ordered. The second group of ships activated their energy field generators. Space itself seemed to ripple as the fields expanded, merging with the particle clouds. The crystal entity's growth visibly slowed where the fields touched it. Professor Blue's color brightened. It's working. The growth rate has decreased by 47%. But then the entity did something unexpected. Its surface began to pulse with energy, pushing back against the human attack. It's adapting. Someone shouted. Right on schedule, Anna smiled. That's why we have Phase 3. All vibration array ships, full power. Hit it with everything. The final group of ships moved into position. Their arrays lit up, sending invisible waves of energy through the particle clouds and energy fields. The combined effect hit the crystal entity like a hammer hitting glass. Cracks appeared along its surface where all three effects combined. The entity's attempt to adapt to one threat left it vulnerable to the others. It's working. Professor Blue's color was almost white with excitement. The structure is destabilizing. But victory wasn't certain yet. The entity began to shift, trying to repair its damaged sections. New crystal growth appeared, attempting to bridge the cracks. Oh no, you don't, Anna muttered. She grabbed the comm. Tom, execute pattern delta. The mining ships began to move in a complex dance, changing the pattern of their attack. Where the entity tried to repair itself, it found new particle clouds waiting. When it attempted to adapt to the particles, the energy fields shifted frequency. Each time it started to stabilize, the vibration arrays hit it from a new angle. Just like Earth's plate tectonics, Anna explained to the amazed aliens watching. Constant pressure from multiple directions. Nothing can maintain its structure under these conditions. The crystal entity's surface was now covered in spreading cracks. Its attempts to repair itself became slower, more erratic. The beautiful, deadly crystalline structure that had destroyed 49 systems was beginning to fail. Final phase. Anna called out. All ships, maximum power, push it past the breaking point. Every ship in the fleet activated all their systems at once. The combined effect was like a symphony of destruction. The entity's surface shattered in a cascade of breaking crystal, each piece too small to maintain the growth pattern that made it so dangerous. Through the command deck window, they watched as the mighty entity that had terrified the galaxy broke apart into billions of harmless fragments. By the stars, Professor Blue whispered, "You did it. You actually did it." Anna smiled, watching the drifting crystal fragments. "No, Professor. We didn't destroy it. We just changed the conditions until it couldn't maintain its structure. That's how we handle things on Earth. You don't always need to smash something to beat it. Sometimes you just need to change its environment." She turned to look at her fleet of modified mining ships, ugly, practical vessels that had just saved the galaxy. No advanced weapons, no cutting-edge technology, just human ingenuity and an understanding of natural forces that came from living on a world that never stopped trying to kill them. "Send word to the Council," she said. "Tell them the crystal entity has been neutralized. And tell them," she grinned, "sometimes the primitive solution is the right one." The council chamber was more crowded than ever before. Representatives from every spacefaring species had gathered to witness this historic session. Where there had once been fear and desperation, now excitement filled the air. Captain Anna West stood in the center of the chamber, her mining uniform standing out among the formal robes of the council members. Behind her, displayed in the giant hologram, was a recording of the crystal entity's defeat. The once mighty threat now existed only as harmless fragments drifting through space. First Speaker White rose from his seat, his antenna glowing with joy. "Captain West, Professor Blue has submitted his final report on your solution. I must admit, when we first called for human help, this was not what we expected." "Let me guess," Anna smiled. "You expected warships and weapons." Indeed, the speaker's color shifted to a lighter shade. "Instead, you brought mining ships and simple chemistry. You fought this threat not with advanced technology, but with basic natural principles that even your children learn in school." Professor Blue floated forward, his tentacles moving excitedly as he addressed the council. "The humans' approach was brilliant in its simplicity. While we tried to destroy the entity with our most powerful weapons, they saw it for what it was, a natural process that could be controlled." The hologram changed to show the modified mining ships in action. Their solution cost less than 1% of what we spent on our military response. It caused no additional damage to spacetime. And most importantly, it worked. Anna stepped forward. "With respect, Speaker, this is just how we think on Earth. When you live on a world that's constantly trying to kill you, you learn to work with nature instead of against it." One of the younger council members raised their hand. "But how did you know it would work?" "Because that's how we survived Earth," Anna explained. "We couldn't stop volcanoes from erupting, so we learned to predict and redirect their flows. We couldn't prevent earthquakes, so we built structures that could bend without breaking. We couldn't defeat nature, so we learned to understand it instead." The chamber filled with murmurs of appreciation. Even the most skeptical council members were nodding in agreement. First Speaker White raised his hands for silence. "In light of this success, the council has made two historic decisions." He paused for effect. "First, we are establishing a new department, the Deathworlder Advisory Committee. Captain West, we would be honored if you would lead it." Anna blinked in surprise as applause filled the chamber. "Second," the speaker continued, We are revising our classification of Earth and humans. What we once saw as primitive survival instincts, we now recognize as valuable problem-solving skills. Your planet's harsh conditions didn't make you primitive. They made you uniquely qualified to handle challenges we never imagined. Tom, who stood with the other human crew members at the back of the chamber, couldn't help but laugh. All those years of being called primitive Deathworlders, and it turns out that's exactly what the galaxy needed. A hologram shifted again, showing Earth. Many council members who had once looked at the planet with disdain now viewed it with newfound respect. "There's an old saying on Earth," Anna said, looking at the image of her homeworld. "Necessity is the mother of invention. We didn't develop our approach because we wanted to. We did it because we had to." Every human carries thousands of years of survival knowledge in their minds. Knowledge earned the hard way by our ancestors. Professor Blue's color shifted to deep blue, the color of profound understanding. Perhaps this is why the universe creates death worlds, not as mistakes or cruel accidents, but as training grounds for problem solvers. First Speaker White nodded solemnly. "The galaxy faced its end, so we called a Deathworlder. And in doing so, we learned that sometimes the greatest wisdom comes not from advanced technology, but from simple truths learned through survival." Anna looked around the chamber, at the aliens who had once doubted her people. "We don't just survive on Earth," she said proudly. "We learn from it. Every disaster teaches us something new. Every challenge makes us stronger. And now, those lessons will help protect the entire galaxy." The chamber erupted in applause, humans and aliens together, celebrating not just the defeat of the crystal entity, but a new understanding between species. The Deathworlders had proven their worth not through conquest or superior technology, but through something far more valuable: the wisdom gained from living on a world that never made survival easy. Earth's greatest gift to the galaxy wasn't its resources or its military might. It was the simple, powerful knowledge that came from being forged in the crucible of a death world, where every day brought new challenges, and survival meant learning to work with nature itself. The end had been close, but the Deathworlders had shown there was always hope, as long as you were willing to learn from every challenge life threw at you.